everyone, this is Neha Tulsyan from Crescent Creation. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today's video is part of a hop, and in this hop all the participants are using the current Lawn Fawn High Five kit. So you'll be able to see a lot of lovely creations and get inspired to use the kit, or if you do not own the kit, you can use something from your stash which is similar and create some wonderful products. So for my card today, I created this lovely slider interactive card using the products from the kit. I haven't played with my slider dice for a very long time, and looking at this kit, it inspired me to use one of the dice. So here it is. And before I show you how I created this card, I'll just quickly go over the products in this kit. So here is this beautiful pattern paper pad, which is just gorgeous and so lawn fawn, with the lovely colors and dot pattern and the diagonal stripes. This pattern paper is so versatile and can be used all year round. Then we have the cute stamp set with such cute bees and the coordinating die. Next is the honeycomb shaker die, and they also have the honeycomb stencil, and lastly the sparkle glaze. So now let's move on to card making. I have already pre-stamped my images on white cardstock using some black ink which is Copic friendly, and now I'm gonna go ahead and color my images using some Copic markers. I'm gonna go ahead and put some music for you to enjoy the coloring while I color all these images, and then we'll go ahead and put together our card. I've already shown you how to color the honey jar, but I'm showing you a different way here to color the honey jar with a little bit more details, because the honey is put in a glass jar. So I was trying to add some blue color to the sides of this jar to make it look like a glass jar. And once I'm done coloring this image, I'm going to show you the difference between both the jars. There is not a whole lot of difference, but still you can see a little bit of the difference when you look at both the images, and then you can decide on your own which way you want to color your jar. So here I'm done coloring all my images, and now I'm gonna go ahead and use the coordinating die to die cut all these images. Next I'm gonna go ahead and work on the background of my card, and for that I'm using the stencil that's in the kit. I just sprayed the kit with little bit of pixie spray so that it sticks to my cardstock and does not move while I'm ink blending. So here I have 4 inches by 5¼ inch cardstock, and I just glued my stencil to it, and now I'm deciding which oxides to use. I chose the Wild Honey and Scattered Straw Distress Oxide inks, and using my blending brushes I'm now gonna go ahead and ink my background. So I am inking one of the bigger hives in the stencil on the top left corner of my cardstock. I'm being careful to ink only on the stencil and not go outside, or I will stain my cardstock. And once I'm done, I moved the stencil and placed it in a different position, and I'm inking the hive again. I'm gonna go ahead and continue this for a few more times until I ink the whole cardstock. And you can see I left a little bit of white in between the hives. It just felt a little right to me. You can, if you want, ink the whole background and create the hives pattern all over, but I thought a little bit of white between the hives just looked good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and continue inking this cardstock until my background is all done. Here I'm almost done with the base layer. Once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and bring the darker color, which is the Wild Honey Distress Oxide ink color, and now I'm gonna use the second pattern from the stencil and add a second layer to this background. For this second layer, you just have to line up the stencil with the already created hives. It matches perfectly with that, and just ink up with a darker color and you will have a beautiful hive pattern. Here I'm just gonna do that for all the hives that I have created, and that will create the background for today's card. Once I'm done with the stencil, I'm just gonna take my blending brush, and whatever color is on the blending brush and on the glass mat, I'll just use that and ink the edges of my background and even that white space that I left, so it is not that stark white. To create the slider mechanism, I'm gonna die cut my background using one of the sliders die from the Fawn slider circles die set. This die cut cuts a circle and also a frame. The frame area becomes the slider path. And now I'm taking the circle die cut and applying some foam tape behind it. You can see when applying the foam tape, I'm not putting the foam tape on the very edge of the circle, but I'm putting it a little bit towards the center. But I should have put the foam tape more towards the center instead of keeping it just a little far away from the edge, because the sliders will need some space to move around. So I'm going to correct this mistake a little bit later in the video. Here I'm trimming my background just a 1/4 inch more so that it measures 5 inches by 3 3/4. And to achieve that and still have my circle that's die cut out of this background be on the center, I'm cutting 1/8 inch from all the 4 sides. And now I'm gonna go ahead and apply some foam tape all over this background. Once done, I'm gonna bring my card base. I have a white note card, and to this I am gluing a pattern paper. It is the striped pattern paper from the paper pad in this kit. I'm gluing it to the front of my note card using some double-sided tape. And then I'm gonna go ahead and glue my stenciled background. I'm gonna remove all the backing paper from the foam tape behind the background, and I'll glue it in place, making sure it's nicely centered. Once that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and glue the circle frame that I die cut out of the slider die using some liquid glue. And before gluing it in place, I'm just making sure that the pattern on the frame matches with the background perfectly. Now that this is done, it's time to work on the slider elements. So for a slider mechanism to work, you need 3 things. You need a slider path, which we already die cut out of the slider die. Then you need a slider element, and in this case it's the bees. We want them to slide around. And lastly, we will need something that revolves in the slider path. In this case, I'm using the slider discs from My Favorite Things. They are perfect size for the slider paths, and I applied some glue on top of those discs, and I have already glued my bees on it. So I want 3 bees to be sliding in my slider. So here I have 3 bees and I have already glued them to the slider discs. Here I'm just cutting out some circles. They don't have to be exactly circles. They just have to be a little bigger than the slider path itself. And this circle cutouts will help keep the sliders in place in the slider path and not fall out. You can die cut these circles, or you can even use a punch to cut out these circles. Since it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, I just used my scissors and cut out some circles. So here I have already glued my bees to those circle cutouts, and I have placed the bees in place. And here I'm just trying to glue the center part. And this is where I realized that I've added a little extra foam tape behind this circle die cut, and it was hard for me to fit my sliders. Here I even tried to trim those circles, the back circles of the slider elements, so that they fit there properly. But I realized because the foam tape was too close, my sliders were not moving properly. And this is where I decided to take out all my slider elements, and I pulled the center circle and removed the extra foam tape that was around the edges, and I just kept a teensy tiny foam tape in the center of this circle and glued it in place. Once this was done, it was all easy after this. So I first placed my circle backing into the path, and then I glued the bee with the slider disc behind it on top of those circles. I repeated the same steps for the next 2 bees. I first put the circle cutout in the slider path and then glued the bee with the slider disc on top of that circle cutout. Once I had all my 3 bees in place, I let this dry for just a few seconds, so I'm not disturbing the bees while they're drying. I wanted it to be nice and dry before I actually move and see if my slider is working. And once it was dried, I tested it, and yes, it was, and I was so very happy. So now that the mechanism is in place, all is left is to glue all the images and just add a sentiment, and my card would be ready. So here I started gluing my images. I added the banner to the beehive and I glued that in the center. I also glued the honeybee just on top of the beehive. Next, I'm working on my sentiment. I stamped part of the sentiment on black cardstock and I white heat embossed using some white embossing powder. To do that, I prepped my black cardstock using some anti-static powder tool and stamped the sentiment using some clear ink. Poured some white embossing powder on top of the clear ink. Because it's sticky, the powder sticks to it. Then I heat set my sentiment using my heat gun. Here I am trimming off the excess sentiment strip using my scissor. And here I'm working on the second part of the sentiment. So my sentiment reads to the queen bee, and the bee I am die cutting out of the alphabet die. For that, I'm just inking a white cardstock with some scattered straw and wild honey distress oxide ink so that my sentiment matches my background. And I'm using my Henry's ABCs to die cut BEE out of this inked cardstock. And here I die cut two sets of bee sentiment. I wasn't sure which die cut to use. At first I thought I wanted this darker shade of yellow for my sentiment, but later I decided on to go with the ombre effect one. I really liked it and I thought it just popped off of the background better than the darker sentiment. Since I already had two sets of this die cut, I just glued them together so I get a little bit of lift for my sentiment. And now I'm just gluing all my sentiment in place. So I glued the black sentiment strip directly using some liquid glue, and next I'm gluing the bee die cut in place, making sure it's all lined up and straight. Once my sentiment is all glued, now I'm just gluing the rest of the images around it to fill my card front. And I'm also gluing a bee image to the inside of my card. Lastly, I'm stamping the sentiment Happy Bee Day using some black ink. To add some more interest to this card front, I'm gluing this beautiful embellishment from our store. These embellishments are in flower and bee shapes, and I just thought it was perfect for my card today. Next, I'm applying the glitter glaze to all the wings of the bees and also to the bee sentiment. And that finishes my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. So as you know, it is a hop and we do have giveaways. So each of us channels will be giving away the card that we make to one lucky winner. So every channel will announce a winner and the winner will receive their cards in mail. So if you would like to receive this card or any of the cards from the hop, don't forget to hop along and like and comment on each of the video for a chance to win these cards. You can also consider subscribing to our channels because that helps us, motivates us to bring some new content every time for you. And this is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for visiting. Have a nice day.